This Week in Radio Tech, episode 171, is brought to you by the Axia Rack and Desk audio consoles. Small size, small price, but big where it counts. Perfect audio and broadcaster tough. On the web at axiaaudio.com.
And now, our feature presentation.
Twirt.
Look out, trolls. Obama's after you. Look out, radio owners. The FCC's regulatory fees are after you. And who's going to drive my car?
All right, calm down. He says that to everyone.
This calls for immediate discussion.
What's up, Doc?
All your days are belong to us.
From his palatial office of important business, or in a choice hotel in a distant land, this is Kirk Harnack.
Tom Ray and Chris Tobin join me to analyze the topical news that affects radio and broadcast engineering.
You're dialed in to This Week in Radio Tech.
Hey, welcome in. It's time for This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. It's time to talk about radio technology. And we've got a really interesting show for you. I know I say that every week, right? Because I'm just excited about every show that we do. Someday, maybe I'll come on and just say, we just got kind of a so-so show for you. It's not very good. You might want to, turn over and watch an old Gunsmoke or something. We're going to talk about some of the topical, we're going to talk about some of the topical items in the news that affect radio engineering and some that just tangentially affect radio engineering. It's all topical stuff, though. We have opinions, and a few facts thrown in for good measure. And let me introduce to you my incredible co-hosts. First of all, direct from MusicCamUSA.com, the best-dressed engineer in radio from his home abode somewhere in an apartment high over Manhattan. It's Chris Tobin. Hello, Chris.
Well, hello, Kirk. Hello, everyone watching and listening. Yes, here in Manhattan right now, the rain is falling. It's in sheets of water. It's like watching a movie, a Hollywood set in a rain scene. I'm not kidding. I'm looking out the window, looking down the avenue, and it's just like a curtain of water. And it's just rolling along the street, and people are running between cars, and umbrellas are flipping upside down. It's actually entertaining. And this is just the start of it. Apparently, the weather conditions are going to get even more chaotic as the evening goes on.
Let's keep Tom Ray waiting for just a minute and discuss the sheets of rain thing for just a second. You see it all the time. But I, being only an occasional visitor to New York City, have only seen this once. I'm walking through the area in the south end of Manhattan where they have the judicial building and the city hall, and there's an important looking area where they film Law and Order, all the outdoor scenes where they come down the steps, and say what they've done and have a little press conference. They must have been filming a movie and just wrapping up from it, because my wife and I were walking around down there, and they had all these trucks with booms, hydraulic booms. And on top of the booms, they had these spreader bars, and you could tell that they had been creating a rainstorm early that morning or that day. They had been creating a rainstorm with these trucks and these essentially, huge sprinklers that just live overhead. Can they make sheets of rain with that?
Yes, that's exactly what they do. I'm in a neighborhood where they do a lot of filming of movies and TV series as well. And I've watched them at least 2 or 3 times create a rainy afternoon with the sunshine just behind them. And it's interesting. Yes, that's exactly what they do. It's pretty cool. I'm watching it naturally being done right now by Mother Nature, but normally when Hollywood does it, it's pretty close.
They should be out filming right now. They're missing a fine opportunity to be filming a rainy show.
Well, it's like they do those controlled burns in the national parks. When they do Hollywood rain, it's a controlled rain. When we watch Mother Nature, it's just, you're on your own.
Gotcha. All right. Well, cool. Hey, from Manhattan, there's Chris Tobin, and he's at MusicCamUSA.com. Then let's switch over to somewhere else in New York State, from the Hudson Valley of New York. It's our friend and yours, the affable engineer, Tom Ray.
Whose cell phone just rang and let me mute it. There we go. And Chris, it sounds like a lot of sheet to me, what you're talking about down there. But anyway, it's raining up here too. It's been raining all day. It's been on and off. It's been unbelievable. And anyway, I run Tom Ray Broadcast Consulting. I'm here. I'm in a good mood, so I'm in rare form tonight. So watch out, Kirk.
Well, Tom, you're going to be able to comment quite well then on our topical topics. This is our topical topics show. In fact, that'd be a good name for this episode, number 171. Can you believe we've done 171 of these? Are we helping the industry, or are we wasting our lives, guys? What is it?
Or are we out of our
I'm going to go for helping.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think so.
Some people do seem to like us, or like something that we say. Why don't we dive right into it? Except I'll tell you, our show is brought to you by my friends and colleagues at Axia Audio on the web at axiaaudio.com. And I want to tell you, in our commercial break, I'll tell you about the least expensive IP audio consoles you'll find anywhere, the Rack and the Desk. These are 6-fader consoles, and you can see them at axiaaudio.com. If you're really into multitasking, browse over there right now and have a look, and we'll tell you about them as the show moves along. I have personally installed a number of these and also seen quite a few in newsroom operations and dubbing stations, and they're cute and cool and pretty darn affordable too. Get right into the Axia world with these things. All right, we're going to hit several topics here that have to do with broadcast engineering and things that are affecting our industry. And the first one I want to go for is, I'm usually a critic of whatever administration is in office, but this seems pretty good. The headline is in The Economist. Obama goes troll hunting. The president proposes a new round of intellectual property reform. Now, I do worry every time lawyers make laws, and that would be every time. But this kind of sounds interesting. On the one hand, intellectual property seems like it's important. On the other hand, I think we all see little value in troll operations. I'm hearing myself backsworth like really loud. So what does this mean for our industry? And I'll start out with the first paragraph from The Economist. The solitary lumbering trolls of Scandinavian mythology would sometimes be turned into stone by exposure to sunlight. Barack Obama is hoping that several measures announced on June the 4th will have a similarly paralyzing effect on their modern incarnation, the patent troll. Now, affecting the broadcast industry is this company that says that if you're playing music from a hard drive, especially across a network, an IP network, a computer network, you are infringing upon their intellectual property. So, Chris Tobin, you're involved with a company that probably occasionally has to deal with intellectual property questions. What do you think about this this proposal from Obama to reduce the effectiveness of trolls? Is Chris there?
Uh-oh.
Am I there?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. The dog was running around. I had to mute the microphone to minimize the noise. Yeah. I'm going to venture a guess that I've been reading the articles today in the Wall Street Journal and The Economist and a few other places, and I don't see it doing too much good. It's the problem with the patent troll phrase as it's being used. It's just that the laws provide for people to do what they're doing. And unless you change the law, unless you change or improve the patents office ability to look at inventions and say, okay, yes, this is either truly a new idea, or this is just a copy of something, or what they call it, there's a name for it, when the technology is just prevalent and there's no way you can, patent it.
Yeah.
And I don't see anything going in that direction. And that's where I think part of the problem lies. And then I think Representative Congressman Charlie Schumer was also introducing something regarding patent issues. And basically, when the bill was introduced, it was primarily trying to avert patent issues with financial institutions. Because at the time, that's where a lot of the issues have come up. So now what has happened? Like anybody doing an attack, they've changed their position, now going after a different area. So instead of going after financial institutions or the financial industry, they've gone to other places. So if you have a Wi-Fi router and you're using it in your restaurant, somebody can come knocking and say, hey, I own the patent to that technology. You need to pay me or stop using the Wi-Fi router. There is an article that was talked about that. Yeah, so I don't know if it's going to go anywhere because I think the patent system has just blatantly been abused, and that's what's happened. What the president's doing, great. He's bringing attention to the whole thing, but like you pointed out, once the attorneys get something going, there is no reversing it. And then they come up with every reason why you can't, and it's this and that. I mean, let's be realistic. I have a patent for something, and I don't develop it or do anything with it. I sit on it, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I decide I'm going to enforce it. I don't think that's fair. The idea behind the patent system was to, give you a slight protection. I mean, barely, but at least say, hey, you've got something, get out there, do something with it. I mean, that's the spirit of the rule. It
Let me give you
nobody's doing it.
Bit more background here. According to The Economist, Mr. Obama first declared war on patent trolls back in 2011 when he signed the America Invents Act. It was supposed to reduce the number of lawsuits but it's not even slowed the growth rate, unfortunately. The trolls now account for half of the 4,000 or so patent cases every year, so that's over 10 a day in America. The president's new proposals are intended in part to scare off patent troll lawsuits. Courts would gain powers to impose penalties on anyone bringing on what they deem to be a frivolous patent litigation, and the ultimate owner of the patent involved in a lawsuit would have to be disclosed. In other words, it couldn't be a company that just buys the intellectual property of someone else. Well, at least they would have to disclose who the original patent holder was, although that seems like it's public record. The ultimate owner of the patent involved in a lawsuit would have to be disclosed, preventing trolls from hiding behind anonymous shell companies. And that's been a problem. There's some of these companies actually have thousands of shell companies. Those bringing cases would have to be clearer about how their patent is supposedly being infringed. One thing is clear: no one is entirely happy with how the patent system works. Trolls are not the only ones bringing the big patent infringement cases with far-reaching consequences. For instance, on June 4th, America's International Trade Commission found that Apple had infringed on patents held by Samsung, and it banned several Apple products from being imported into America. Whether this sort of thing is good for consumers or not will encourage more Americans to invent things. It's not patently obvious. You know, one thing that makes me wonder is, and you tell me if this is patent or design, maybe somebody knows, on iOS products like an iPad or an iPhone, the keyboard doesn't change between uppercase and lowercase in its representation of the letters and such. It's always uppercase. And yet on an Android device, it's uppercase, lowercase, depending on if you've got the shift on or not. So in other words, with an Apple device, I never know for sure if I'm really going to be typing an uppercase character or a lowercase character until the character is actually typed or I look at the shift key. Now, I thought I heard once upon a time that that's because of a patent, that Apple is not allowed to show the keyboard in uppercase or lowercase depending on its state. You guys ever noticed that or heard of that? Is that right? That's right?
Yeah, I did. I remember hearing about that a couple of years ago. There's a few things with the swipe as well. But the keyboard was one of them because I had the same issue with my Android phones and iPhones. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then the latest thing is some of the new Android updates, the keyboard. What did they change? Something changed with the word OK is, instead of it being on the right side, now it's on the left side. Me being left-handed, I got so used to doing it one way, and all of a sudden, I'm disconnecting calls. I'm like, what am I doing? So it has to do with the patents. Yes, it's getting more ridiculous.
I heard. I don't know if this is part of Obama's proposals or what he would like to see proposed, but what if we went to a loser pays system for patent litigation? So if you bring a lawsuit and you lose, you pay the expenses of both sides, your own and the defendant's side. Or I
believe that already exists.
Really?
Yes, I believe that does exist. I was watching a program on such topic. That when was that? It was a couple of months ago, and they spoke about that. There is something in the court system or that is available, but you have to be careful how you apply that. And the attorney was trying to explain it, and I forget now how it went.
According to an article from Ars Technica, this is back from February 2013, the headline is "Peeved Politicians Want a Loser Pays Rule for Patent Trolls." So I hadn't heard that was in effect, and this article seems to imply that it's not yet. It's not that it's a ruling. It's a procedural. What did that attorney call it? It's a procedural thing. It's there in various forms. I think what politicians are trying to do is make it a rule or a law or some kind of blatant, like, this is it. And the attorney that I was watching was talking about it. You can't just apply it singularly to one thing because you have to be careful how you apply. Because then what happens is people who don't have the wherewithal to pay for attorneys will be discouraged, and then everything will fall apart. And that's part of what they were trying to explain. And then that was like 3 or 4 months ago. It was interesting. Wow. Yeah, if folks want to look this up, there is a bill that's been proposed called the SHIELD Act. It's amazing how they make these acronyms try to work out. Saving High-Tech Innovators from Egregious Legal Disputes. SHIELD. It's being promulgated by a Republican of Utah, Jason Jaffords, and a Democrat of Oregon, Peter DeFazio. And so this is the SHIELD bill that they're trying to get put in. The bill does try to figure out who is a patent troll, and that can be tricky to figure out. What is egregious behavior of a patent troll, and what is legitimately defending someone's intellectual property. So That it's maybe, and I'm sure if you're, it's going to vary depending on your viewpoint. Tom Ray, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to leave you out of this. What perspective have you on this notion, this patent trolling?
Basically, if you have a patent, you're entitled to it. However, if you sat on the sidelines for 10 years, 20 years, and all of a sudden you step off, what's wrong with this picture? It's like the broadcast, the audio automation lawsuit that's out there right now.
Yeah.
Patent infringement. It's like we've been doing music and spots and everything else on hard drive for what, Chris, about 20 years now?
Yeah. I think that's what people need to sit down and argue.
Yeah, exactly. And now these guys want to be paid? Hello?
The Oregon statute of limitations.
Well, here's what the Oregon rep says he's putting in the bill. This was DeFazio, the Democrat from Oregon. He noted that patent trolls are morphing in alarming ways. DeFazio cited the new wave of scanner trolls, demanding $1,000 per worker from businesses that use routine technology, DeFazio's words, using routine technology, like scanning documents to email. They just broadcast letters. This is the patent trolls, broadcast letters. They've done this in Georgia and for some odd reason in North Dakota to any and all small business they think might have a scanner and tell them they've got to pay $20,000 if they want to keep using their scanners and attaching the scans to emails. The bill would also allow patent defendants to file a motion seeking to have a judge rule that the patent owner is a certain type of non-practicing entity. That's where you go that they're really not making the product that they wanted patented, although the bill doesn't use that term non-practicing entity. If the motion is successful, the lawsuit can still proceed, but if the patent holding company loses, it'll be on the hook for all legal costs. Since defending a patent lawsuit through trial can easily cost $2 to $5 million, that could be a significant deterrent. The usual patent troll strategy is to ask for a six-figure settlement, well below the cost of litigation. Some trolls, though, have been more ambitious, while others settle for amounts below $100,000, which are basically considered a nuisance payment in the patent world. Of course, I think a lot of us would go back to the patent office and say, why are they issuing patents for things that are obvious? We do have to ask ourselves, were they obvious at the time of the patent, or were they groundbreaking? I've just heard a story last week. A lot of times a patent is filed from some guys doing something that's just slightly novel, and somebody saying, hey, we should patent that. And they have no working model. They basically just draw a figure on a napkin, and I'm exaggerating here, and describe a process that's very nebulous and get that nebulous process patented. And then they have this patent that they're free to, a decade later, free to try to enforce when the technology is really obvious at that point.
Isn't there a statute of limitations on a patent, or do they go on forever?
It's normally 17 years.
Yeah, there is a time limit.
Yeah. Wow.
A lot of the patents that are being enforced, I'll say with questionability, are well within that time frame. But Tom's point, I think, is makes sense. If you haven't done anything with it, and then all of a sudden you just appear out of nowhere. I mean, yes, you do have the right on one level. It's like the old saying, well, it's not illegal, but it's it's legal to do what I'm doing, but it is unethical. You're right, but I'm legally allowed to do it. It's the same thing with the patents. You sit on it for 10 years or 12 years, or you wait until that year before it expires and decide, hey, I'm going to cash in. I mean, it has to be something. That's what people need to. Politicians want to do something. That's where you sit down and look at it. And to your point, Kirk, the patent office over the last 20 years does not have the staffing that properly should be looking at stuff for prior art, or should have the wherewithal. Because if you read some of the articles over the last 10 years, how the patent office has been manned or managed, I guess is the best way to put it, it's scary. I mean, you're right. You could go in there with a napkin, so to speak, do something and say, here you go. And people are letting it go. And then they say, well, let the courts decide. Well, the court's not equipped to decide. And then it becomes this vicious cycle. But politically, though, a lot of people make out. As I always say, follow the money.
What about the notion, and this has been brought up before by some people, what about the notion that software and processes should not be patentable? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I mean, if you have if you come out with unique software or a unique process to do something, a unique way to paint your desk, why you thought of it first? Why shouldn't you be able to patent it?
Well, that's it, and you're right, Tom. And I think, and that question has come up a lot about the software and stuff. I think it goes back to, again, we should be strengthening and reinforcing the patent office or the patent system at that level, not after the fact. It's like, the horses are out of the barn and all of a sudden you want to decide which horses you want to keep or let go. It's like, wait a minute, it's too late.
Right.
That's where I think it really should be done. Software, you come up with something novel, all right. You apply for a patent or a copyright and say, hey, I've got this process that does X, Y, and Z. You put it to the people that have the wherewithal to look and research, put a time limit on how long it takes from the research, and you do it. And then you have a caveat. If after a certain period of time it's discovered that maybe it wasn't as unique, maybe you have some way of changing it. I'm just thinking out loud. But to limit what you can and cannot patent because of the situation we're in, I think would be wrong. Because I've met a lot of programmers who have some really novel ideas, and they're afraid to do even copyright, patent, trademark, whatever you call it, because once they bring it out into the open, you're dead. So, I think that the patent office needs to be addressed. That's where it needs to start. All this other stuff, it's superfluous. Patent office, because those are the gatekeepers. That's where you need to go. Gatekeepers.
Yeah. All right. Well, and that case about the automation system is still proceeding through the courts, as I recall. Okay, not too different from the subject of patents is this subject of royalty payments that broadcasters and people who stream music, people who use music as a draw to to get people to listen, to participate. If you are a business, a bar, a restaurant, for example, or a retail store, and you're playing music in your store to set a mood, to make the shopping experience ostensibly better than without the music, do you owe money to the people who wrote the music and performed the music? And the answer is yeah, you do owe money for that. To use somebody else's work like that, you have to pay for it. Thankfully, if you do it right, it's not a lot of money. If you subscribe to a service like Muzak, it's paid for. Your monthly payment to Muzak pays that takes care of that fee. So what's been in the news here is that Pandora, the online streaming service with lots and lots of channels and custom channels you can make yourself. It's a pretty interesting service, and man, a lot of people listen to it. Pandora just bought a radio station. Why? Why did they buy a radio station? Not because they want to figure out how a transmitter works or because they just miss having a studio. They bought a radio station because there's something about the music licensing and music royalty rules, and I'm sorry, I'm not 100% up on that. That if they own a radio station, as a broadcaster, they get to pay a very slightly lower, not much lower, but a very still it could over time mean millions of dollars, slightly lower royalty fee to ASCAP and perhaps to BMI and to CSAC and the others because they are a broadcaster then, because they're a broadcasting entity. So what do we think about that? Pandora's lawyers think smart move. They spent $600,000 and bought a radio station. The ASCAP and BMI say we're not budging. You're not a broadcaster. You're a streamer who just bought a radio station. Doesn't change your rates. You guys been following this? What do you think?
I've been seeing. I'm looking at it on and off, and I mean, that kind of goes into the category in my mind of, well, you can do certain things to avoid paying a certain amount of taxes, which are legal, whether or not you like it or not, it's legal. If this is the case, why not? And if you actually take a look at the rules, the streaming rules, and take a look at the broadcast rules, I mean, it's very difficult in my mind to justify what they want for streaming a song. Especially when an argument comes out and they say, well, somebody could take it and digitally copy it. If you're streaming it at 64 kilobits and you've got god-awful audio processing under it, why would you want to take that and press it to a CD? Some people would, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting that I hadn't thought about that argument that has been made in the past. That, well, you're streaming this digitally now. People can make a digital copy of it. Well, digital ain't digital all the time. And I get what you're saying. Back in the technology of the cassette tape era, my goodness, when I was a 10-year-old kid, I was recording songs all the time off the radio. And I'd go listen to those songs back. Yes, with the disc jockey stepping all over the front and a back announce on the back of it. But still, I could listen to the song. It was time shifting, right? Back in 1972. It was time shifting in 1972. And yeah, I could listen when I wanted to without having to hear the radio station's commercials, and without having to pay for the song, for buying the 45 RPM record, which I couldn't carry around with me. I'm trying to remember, did I ever record any songs off the record? I don't remember ever doing that. I just remember recording songs off the radio, usually by holding a mic up to the speaker. Oh my goodness, that was terrible.
And somebody in the chat room asked, the better question is, why did they buy a radio station in Rapid City, South Dakota? Probably because the streaming fee would be a little bit less because there's less of an audience.
Well, that might be. That might be. But now I don't purport to understand all of ASCAP's and BMI's rules about your market size and how many people you hit, but there does seem to be a differentiation, at least in Pandora's mind. Hey, if we're a broadcaster who also streams, then we get to pay a very slightly lower rate on some fee that we have to pay, or some royalty. If we're a streaming company alone, we have to pay a higher fee, and so that's why they've done this. Now, if we look at what has been said by hang on here, ASCAP President Paul Williams says Pandora is trying every trick in the book to underpay songwriters and performers. All right, well, I have a little bit of knowledge about this, and I might be cynical and say, well, no, Mr. Paul Williams, president of ASCAP, is trying every trick in the book to underpay songwriters and performers. But that may just, I'm just saying. Paul Williams, is referring to Pandora's move to purchase that FM in South Dakota in order to qualify for the same lower music royalties that terrestrial radio broadcasters pay on their streams. Pandora has said its rate set before that of satellite radio and terrestrial radio is so high, it's cutting into its ability to make a profit. The streaming music service has been lobbying for a lower rate. Now, whatever business practices and business model Pandora has set up for itself, that's its own problem. It's made its bed. It's got to lie in it. Pandora, I got to think, if Pandora can't make a profit doing what they do, how could anybody? Because Pandora is really hugely popular. I mean, all my friends who used to be radio listeners, not all my friends, but I know a lot of people who listen to Pandora every day. And I plan to listen to radio too, usually in the car. But when will that change? When we get it 4G LTE on the dashboard all the time. Upstairs we've got a Wi-Fi radio. There's several radio stations that are on presets, but there's a couple of Pandora presets too. And whatever we're in the mood for, that's what we listen to. But I digress. Pandora made its business model. And of course, they want to reduce expenses wherever they can. If that means, hiring fewer people or paying less for bandwidth because they're able to get better algorithm technology and a lower bit rate and still make people happy with the quality of the music, fine. If they can pay a lower rate for what they have to pay for playing songs, well, they ought to at least give that a try. And if the rate is lower, if you own a radio station, if you're a terrestrial broadcaster who also streams, fine. Williams says in a statement that internet and traditional AM/FM radio services are very different businesses with different formats, and they use music in different ways. Songwriters and composers are struggling in the digital economy to be paid fairly for their creative work. Pandora and ASCAP are also involved in a court case over the music royalties that the internet streaming service pays. So they're separately in a court case over that. Now, it's my understanding that Pandora has not been turning a profit. They're coming closer to turning a profit, but they've not been turning a profit. Sure, of course, songwriters ought to get paid. I've heard it said that Lady Gaga or somebody made a comment recently that they said, "Yeah, I got my royalty check, last quarter. It was for $12." Okay, I don't know where all the money goes to or how it goes. I know that the guy who used to live in the house that I'm in right now, I live in the house that Otis Blackwell used to live in. He wrote "Love Me Tender," "Don't Be Cruel," "Great Balls of Fire," "Fever," "Handyman." He wrote a bunch of hit songs, and he wasn't rich, but he got some, multi-$1,000 checks in the mail when he was still alive. And I guess his estate is still getting some. So, okay, I've gone on and rambled quite a bit about this. I think it's a perfectly legitimate move that Pandora is trying. And if that indeed falls under ASCAP's rules, then ASCAP, maybe didn't think about their rules before they set them. In the end, of course, a court will figure it out. I've been yapping too long. Chris Tobin, do you have an opinion about this move?
Well, I remember there was a program. There was a program talking about royalties, artists, all this stuff, and a lot of artists get paid up front a lot of their fees, what they would have made in royalties, a lot of the contracts. So it depends. I think years and years ago, a lot of the artists just simply said, I'll figure out a way to get from day to day, but I'm going to put in for the royalties and live off that. But there was a program, a documentary about this about a year ago. And it's interesting when you say, Lady Gaga says, I get my $12, my royalty check. Well, there's a good chance she probably got a lot of money up front. And that's why. That's exactly what the documentary talked about. Because they went to, they had various artists they went to that are broke. They have no money. And it turns out that that's the way the contract was written. So, I think this whole thing with the piracy and copying and with the MPAA and everybody, BMI, ASCAP, and all the others all screaming about, it just, they're not looking at the new model. They're just holding on to something that really you can't do anything about. Yes, it's digital. Is it a question of whether somebody records 64K or 384? Who's to say? But, are the artists getting properly compensated? End of story. Do you think that $1 billion a year is lost, and as a result, people are out of a job because of piracy? I don't know. I'm still suspect about the numbers they keep throwing at people.
My own congresswoman here where I live was very much on the side of what was that SOPA? So the SOPA ruling the SOPA law that didn't pass, the bill that didn't pass, because I'm pretty sure that she has good friends in the recording industry here. That's a lot of which is based here in Nashville, where I am, and it's such a red herring, I believe, to let's say that in the course of a year, the music industry tabulates that. I don't know, 800 million songs and movies were illegally downloaded. In other words, they were downloaded and not paid for. Well, you can't count that as lost revenue because but they do. They want to say, and therefore we lost this much money, because those people, most of them were not going to buy that music or movie anyway. They weren't going to pay money for it. If they can get it free by pirating it, fine. If they can borrow it from a friend, fine. But they weren't going to pay money for it. And there's plenty of people that aren't going to pay money for it. They're going to wait till it's available free, or if it comes out on Netflix, or if they can borrow it from a friend, or use BitTorrent or something to illegally obtain a copy of the movie or song. I believe that there is a net benefit to pirating. I believe that a lot of people pirate things for a little while. They look into it. They find out how to do it. They used to use there were some easy ways to do it. File donkey or those kind of things. And then they get tired of the crap that you have to go through to obtain pirated copies of stuff. Now, I know this is a techie audience. There are people in this audience who know how to do this and avoid the crap, and it's easy to do, and they get pirated copies of whatever movie they want. But for most people, they end up downloading a bunch of malware. They get copies of things that sure, it plays the movie, but also infects their computer. In the long run, it isn't worth it, and people figure that out and go back to buying stuff as long as the price isn't ridiculous. I'll give you a great example. I really want to have a copy of or be able to watch the HBO show from last season called The Newsroom. I saw this on some airplanes, love the show. I'd love to pay a reasonable price and enjoy it in my home. The DVD set is $60. The Blu-ray set is $80. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay that much. I'll pay $15 or $20 for the season and watch it on Netflix or something like that. And if it's available, I don't know about it. The only way I've seen it is on DVD and Blu-ray. And to me, that's the industry being stupid. That's Aaron Sorkin and HBO saying, you know what? People want it bad enough. They're going to pay us $80 for the set. Now, if you buy the set, you also get to watch it online. And I'm not going to, that's stupid money, I think. That's too much.
But if you drop the price, twice as many people are liable to go ahead and buy it, and you're going to make more money.
Well, I would think so.
I
would think so. You can't raise the price later. So I understand coming out with a high price, but I'm not going to be a customer right now. I'm still looking for a place to watch it free. Maybe my next multi-$1,000 airplane trip across the Pacific, I'll get to watch it for free.
Hey, Chris, I think you can go visit Kirk someplace and bring him a cake with a file in it soon.
Yes, it's maybe a ceramic knife would be better.
Yeah. I'm back on the subject of ASCAP. I think more interesting, and I do this all the time. Maybe you guys do it too. When you read an article online, some newspaper from The Economist or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or CNN, the article is interesting enough, but the comments are oftentimes, and if you read comments enough, you get to quickly separate the stupid, crazy comments from just the haters from the intelligent comments. And it's interesting. Even intelligent comments that I might disagree with are interesting to read and try to put myself in that person's shoes. On this ASCAP thing, I see some. This is from the Radio Inc. website. Some different people have commented. One person says, "Good for ASCAP. Pandora knew or should have known the rules before they got in the business. It's not ASCAP's problem that Pandora is a giant venture capital black hole." Well, obviously, this person doesn't care much for Pandora. It shows pretty well. But the very next comment is, ASCAP has been caught with their pants down. They're protecting their Clear Channel and other mega broadcast partners from fees not paid by solely internet broadcast. While I agree that an FCC license is not a guarantee of internet access, it was the criteria selected by ASCAP to have a two-tier royalty system that is elevated for the internet-only streamers. Either tell Clear Channel no discount or make it equitable for all. Now, to me, that seems reasonable. What if that's ASCAP's rule, then that's their rule. But there may be more to their rule than we know. So, you guys got any more rants before I move on?
Oh, no, I'm good. I can easily rant on the music and that whole licensing thing, but I'm not going to. It's not worth the trouble.
Not worth the trouble.
We got other things we can talk about and have a great old time.
Hey, start you a radio station in American Samoa. Because American Samoa, even though it's a U.S. territory, in some ways it's a separate country. One of the ways it's a separate country is it doesn't recognize U.S. treaties, and that includes intellectual property treaties. If you own a radio station in American Samoa, there is no one to legally pay royalties to. Did you hear me?
What about streaming?
Well, we don't know. That may be a little gray. We don't know. In American Samoa, our streams originate in American Samoa. And American Samoa has no intellectual property treaties with the U.S.
That's interesting.
Which means if you own a cable channel in American Samoa, you can go buy old copies of Star Trek or Mr. Ed and play them on the cable channel and not pay anything for them. Now, I don't think that's right. But, again, there is nobody to legally pay.
See, that's that legal but unethical approach.
Yeah. Is it unethical? Well, it may be. Nobody's getting... Now, yeah, goodness. I mean, really? You want 2% of the income of American Samoa radio broadcasters? Really?
It's the principles. It's not the money.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Hey, here's some good news. Good news for radio. Arbitron released another radar national radio listening report today. The report says radio's audience increased year over year. I sure hope that's true and they're not fudging the numbers. Increased year over year, adding more than 430,000 weekly listeners. That's almost 500,000 weekly listeners. Arbitron says radio now reaches 242.5 million listeners, or 92% of persons 12 and older on an average weekly basis. Additionally, daily time spent listening to radio among persons age 12 and older held steady versus the June radar report. So the June 2012 report apparently had gone down from 2011. People 12 and older spend about 2 hours and 36 minutes a day with radio. Do you guys remember over time how that compares with, say, 10 years ago? Isn't that less than 10 years ago?
I think so.
I was thinking 10. Back when I was selling radio ads, I thought it was about 3 hours a week on average. And now it's 2.5 hours.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you could be right.
So less time spent listening over decades time span, but at least in the last year, it's not down on time spent listening. And the number of listeners, the number of weekly listeners is up by 500,000, almost 500,000.
And the interesting thing is all those people were stuck in New York traffic. They had no choice. So.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, that's good. What can radio stations do with those numbers in terms of having some confidence to get on the street and see some advertisers?
They still need to be creative about their programming.
Yeah.
The numbers are okay, but when you go to somebody, you try to tell them, look, buy into my radio station because the national standard measuring agency says radio itself is up, we'll say 10%. That guy standing at that merchant's going to look at you and go, yeah, I listen to your radio station. It sucks. Okay, now what do you do?
Yeah.
And that's the reality. I mean, especially if you're a music station, you know how many places I've gone with salespeople over the years when a music station they're trying to do a pitch? The average lit person, as far as they're concerned, those 5 top 40 stations, even though they have a slightly different twist, they don't hear it. They don't even recognize it. All they know is it's not what they like. Their customers don't listen to it. Why would I bother supporting it? And that's what it comes down to.
What's interesting, Kirk, is if that guy in line said, I listen to your radio station, it sucks, my next question to him would be, tell me why it sucks and then why you listen if it sucks. Because maybe I'd learn something.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there was a time I worked at a radio station. I'll never forget. This was a classic sales meeting. Engineering was always supposed to be at a sales meeting at least once a week, so we could understand what was going on and exchange ideas. So it doesn't always go well with people who don't get what you do, but it was a worthy effort. But I'll never forget sitting in a meeting with a new program director. Had changed the format of the station, made it more listenable, more relevant to the audience. Took advantage of all the various ways of making ratings recall work for you back in the days of the diary. And in the meeting, the sales manager was at a very, very high-pitched, stern voice chastising the program director on these changes, and he was complaining. And here's why he was complaining.
Yeah.
His clients were getting pissed off at the fact that the radio station's call letters were being mentioned too many times a day or an hour. And then we have to stop this, and it's causing them grief in the sales office. Program director sat there, gave pause, and he said, so let me get this straight. They're listening long enough to the radio station that had no ratings 6 months ago, long enough to complain that they're hearing the call letters too often. Sales manager goes, absolutely. So the program director looks at the general manager and goes, is this a problem that I should be concerned with, or should it be a problem that you have with your salespeople and don't understand how to explain the power of radio? I sat there, and it was like, whoa. Sales manager was taken out of the office, out of the room. General manager, there was a lot of loud noises in the back office. Since then, months later, we continued doing a lot of promotions and stuff. Sales manager never argued or complained about the ideas that came out of programming. It was true, though. I mean, we did stuff that today people would be like, whoa, that's crazy. That's what sets you apart. It's like Johnny Ives at Apple. Mm-hmm. Why is Apple always picked on for design and this and that? You know what? Because he goes the extra mile, or he looks at a different approach. He goes, you know what? Yeah, I could do it like that, but I'm not going to, because I know this is going to work. And there's going to be a few people who don't like it, so be it. That's the way it goes. Programming and radio needs to be the same way. You know what? I'm in New York City. I have access to 20, 30, 35 music stations easily on the dial. Go across the dial at any given time. They all sound the same. How do you expect to differentiate yourself? And then we have the sports, news, and talk formats, and they're starting to homogenize and sound about the same. Because now they're all using the same people, because they're consolidating, because it costs too much to do this and that. Eventually, you can't do anything. That's what's going on. And that's why Pandora's of the world, or I'll call it internet radio, is catching on in some arenas, because people see it as something different and go, hey, that's what I've been looking for. Great. They don't care how they get it. That's how they're getting it. It works. That's what they want. It's the content.
My brain. We've made this observation many times, where engineers will talk about the content, and there's little, if any, creativity in the content, and yet at the same time, program directors are trying to work between whatever they're being told by the consultants and what they feel about creativity and the talent that they have to work with, which may be a lot, maybe a little. One thing you don't hear, though, and I'm kind of surprised that we haven't heard it, but one thing you don't hear is a sharp sales manager gets up in front of the meeting and says to the engineer, well, how are we supposed to compete? We're using an Omnia processor, and so are 12 other stations in this market. We're just like everybody else. We're using a Harris transmitter at the station, and 7 other stations are too. How can we be different? You engineers need to fix that.
We're all using an RE20 microphone. We all sound the same. All the announcers.
I don't know.
They all went to the same place to learn how to talk on the air.
That's right. Yes, Chris.
I will tell you that, again, I had a very good fortune to work with somebody that did exactly that. Program director. I kid you not. This is back at that radio station that was well run, well managed. The group they just knew what they wanted. Program director came in to me and said, look, I used to work in Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, everybody did this, this, and this. He goes, how do we differentiate ourselves with the technology? I know we have to have some of the same stuff, but I don't like the microphones we have. Can we get something different? Like, sure. I don't like this. Can we get something different? Sure. And we went out to the transmitter site. He goes, if we were to do something different with the transmitter, the audio, can we be different? I was like, absolutely. That was once in my career. It never happened again after that. But if you had a programmer or a sales guy that really understood what they were trying to accomplish, there's no reason why they can't do it within the confines of the wacky world we're in. And I would encourage it. I mean, I've worked with program directors who had enough technical prowess to be able to say, hey, I don't know all the details, but I know the box we have is X. And I have had people say Omnia, Optimod, and a few others, the old stuff. And they said, I don't really know what it is that does this and that, but I can explain it to you, and can we go and listen and work together on it? Those program directors I have worked with, and there's far and few, unfortunately, but it can be done. And I've worked with sales managers who want to know what we can do to be different with technology. Chris, again, they're not looking for depth.
What you have brought up here is a fantastic teachable moment, and it's not an us versus them or anything like that. But you have, I was going to say stumbled upon, but I don't think you stumbled into this at all, because you're very thoughtful about how you look at this. It's something that we all need to be able to back up and approach problems from this way, and that is, let's ask these questions all the way around. What can we do different? And what can we do different doesn't just mean can we play one Lady Gaga song or 2 Lady Gaga songs every hour. Can we give away more cash? Can we do more remotes from the outside? But you're exactly right. Is there anything else we can do? Can we use different microphones? Can our jocks sound different? And not necessarily better, but can they sound different without sounding bad than other stations? Can our audio processing be different? Could our coverage areas, there's some way we could improve that? Or if we can't improve it, can we make it better in the places that it already is, so that we don't get multipath problems? These are the right questions to be asking. And even if the question boils down to, hey, what if it's discovered that your backup transmitter site, if you have one, if you're in a big market, perhaps, your backup transmitter site actually has a more desirable coverage area than your main transmitter site. Is there something legally we could do about that to make our backup site to use that all the time and make the main site the backup site? Is there some way that whatever it may be, whether it's in the engineering, whether it's the art department, creating, the artistic design of the station or the website, whether it's do we get all the jocks to wear, fashionable clothes or the same uniform? What can we do different to present ourselves to the public that draws attention in a positive way? And I think it's great that you had somebody asking you those questions. What can we do different in engineering to set ourselves apart from the other station? A question that we all ought to be asking about lots of subjects whenever we can.
That's true. There's people out there that do it. Not many, but there are.
Yeah, and you used to find it more in the past than you do now. So,
I had a boss once upon a time who was really good at doing this. Okay, guys, we think we know where we're going with this. Let's back up and just tear it apart. And he would approach it from all kinds of crazy angles and ask the really tough questions, not because he thought we were going in the wrong direction, but because he thought we need to examine this and make sure that our answer is the same every way we ask the question. And if it's not the same, let's find the weakness in what we all thought was right. Boy, what a good exercise that is. My friend, the late Steve Church, would often say, let's do a thought experiment and approach it that way. Okay, some bad news. Just west of where I live here in Davidson County, Tennessee, there's a small county, not a big population, called Cheatham County. If you've ever heard of a country music singer named Don Williams, he had some big hits like Tulsa Time and things like that.
Wait,
Don lived.
Wait, Cheatham County, is that where the lawyers live?
Do we cheat them out? No. Yeah. But it is spelled about that way. Cheatham County had one radio station, an AM daytimer on 790 AM, WQSV, licensed. I think it may have been licensed to Ashland City, Tennessee. Signed off the air for good last Saturday. Couldn't make it anymore. The owner, general manager, and main program host, he did most everything himself. Fellow named Corky Albright. He's owned the station since for 22 years. He bought it back in 1991 or so. Yeah, couldn't make it anymore. I should have sent the link over to Andrew to have him show some pictures. But they've got an old Gates console. It's an AM daytimer on 790. I would hate to be in a position of owning an AM daytimer in a small market. I don't know how you make that work in this day and age. Do you guys?
Well, Kirk, it's funny you mentioned that. We have on the other side. I'm going to say the other side of the county. I'm on the east side of Orange County. On the west side of Orange County, there's a town called Warwick, and they have a little AM daytimer in there. It's a 500 watter. They have an FM translator, and I first met the owner of the station about 10 years ago. And at that time, they didn't have the FM translator, and that was kind of right about the time where streaming was kind of starting to become, pardon the phrase, mainstream. And he was a 24/7 operation. Now, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, you just said he was a daytimer. He used to have a live person sitting there overnight running a polka show. They had 500 listeners on the stream every night. He used to sell spots and make money. He doesn't want to try to reach really outside of that town. Yeah, he does. I mean, he hits the surrounding area. He knows where his market is. He knows where his people are. He's live from 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon when he brings in some satellite programming. He brings in the nun from the local church to do a show. He brings in the mayor. He brings in anybody and his uncle to do a show. And it's good local radio. That's all they do is local radio. It's unbelievable. Yeah. So if you get creative, you can do it.
So what you're saying is when he signs off for his on the air, he continues on the internet for the experience of the radio station.
Well, that's how it used to be, but now he's got an FM. He's an AM with an FM translator, so the FM translator stays on the air after the AM signs off. So he is truly a 24/7 station now on the air, but he still has the web stream.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is all the shows we've done and we've talked about this topic. Many people have given me grief about me saying, it's about the content, understanding a new way of taking an approach. And I always said the internet stuff, I'll call it that. There's many things when it comes to web. It should be an augmentation of what you do. What you just described for that radio station in Warwick was he looked at what he had and said, okay, what do I do when I sign off? How do I continue the experience as it's known? He went and did, a poker game or whatever. He did it on the stream and made it happen. He still continued making revenue. That revenue creation allowed him to move to FM.
But not only that, it wasn't like he was doing a separate radio station because he
exactly
and stuff. He just continued doing what he was doing, and he had an audience. It was unbelievable.
And that's the point I've been making all these shows with people, because I've worked at 2 radio stations that did exactly that in the early days of the web, and then when the corporate folks got involved with, web development and took it away from the radio station and did their own thing, that's when everything fell apart. And we all sat there going, what are you doing? We were making money. But you explained a perfect example of, to answer Kirk's question, though, AM daytime only, it may not have that option in every place you go, but at least that person, did exactly what he should be doing as a businessman.
Right.
Seems like you got to be able to offer an audience something that they care about and want to hear. Hey, my boss, Frank Foti, is involved with streaming the high school football games from the high school that he went to east of Cleveland, Ohio. And they have an audience, of course, of people who can't get to the game, don't want to get to the game. It's raining, it's too hot, it's too cold, whatever it might be, and they can listen to the game streaming. But no radio station is going to play it. The audience isn't big enough or perceived to be big enough for any stations around there. And that's what happens when you get every station around the city moving in thinking they're a big city station. They all have to try to cater to the big city. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that's the way it's going to end up happening. The stations that I'm part owner of, we do cater to a lot of small town needs. I wish we could do more of it. But we're going to remind folks that you're listening or watching episode number 171 of This Week in Radio Tech. It's a show where we talk about radio technology. Sometimes we get really geeky and talk about transistors and diodes and RF capacitors and all kinds of stuff like that. But not tonight. We're talking about some topical things in the news, some of them that affect broadcasting and broadcast engineering and how we feel about some of those things. Our show is brought to you by my employer, and tonight, two of their really cool products, Axia Audio. If you want to follow along at home, go to axiaaudio.com/RAQ, RAC. That's axiaaudio.com/RAQ. And this is a very cool little console. It's the rack console, and it's rack mountable. Years and years ago, there was a broadcast console manufacturer that made consoles that were just heavy duty as all get out. There's a picture of it. Isn't that pretty? It's cute, and it just does so much. And its functionality is so much more than what is indicated by just the few simple buttons and displays that are on there. Anyway, a company made consoles that would go in naval vessels, submarines, and ships, and they were rack mountable, and they were heavy duty. Well, Axie is continuing that tradition by building the rack, RAQ, console. Also, the desk can be rack mounted as well. The desk is a little bit bigger. It has sliding faders on it. The rack is more compact and has round faders on it. These consoles are small. Now they have just two buses on them, program 1 and program 2. They will still make a separate mix minus for basically any source on the console. So you could be making 6 mix minuses if you want to with a rack or a desk console. Either one of them or both at the same time will plug into one of our new engines called the Core 16 or the Core 32. Actually, I think these need the Core 32 to plug into. Guess I should clarify that. Well, I don't know. When was the last? Oh, yeah. It'll plug. You can plug 2 of them into a Core 16. That gives you a very inexpensive console setup. If you have need for 2 consoles that are in close proximity to each other, you can use just one Core 16 or a Core 32 engine and plug 2 of these surfaces into it. And they'll operate like 2 independent audio consoles. Yeah, you can share some sources and some outputs. But the cost becomes pretty low when you do it that way. There's a lot of design features in here that make these things really, really durable. For example, all the rotary faders on these consoles, whether it's the headphone or the speaker level volume control or the round faders themselves, these are not carbon or faders or anything like that. These encoders. They're optical encoders that encode in a digital word for the mix engine to use in setting the level that you're setting. They have the availability of programming different profiles into them. You can easily pick one of 4 different profiles. Hey, I just installed one of these consoles at my stations in American Samoa last August, and it was just a dream to put in. Easy as could be. You give it an IP address, you put it on the network, you plug the local sources into the back of it and the local destinations like headphones and speakers. Maybe you need to send an audio feed to a cassette recorder or some other external device. No problem. You just wire those things up. Easy to do. There's an Ethernet switch built in to the back of this console, so you can hook it right into the rest of an Axia network. That Ethernet switch even has some PoE, power over Ethernet jacks. So if you get one of the Telos's phone systems to put with one of these consoles, literally, you plug it right in, you set a few IP addresses, and the console even powers the desktop, the VSET phone. So, I mean, what could be simpler? It's a low amount of cables. We do everything with Ethernet that you ought to be doing. Power over Ethernet. The audio is live wire, so it's IP audio done right, done to standards that exist. We don't break any standards by doing IP audio. So I'd encourage you to check it out. You got a project coming up. You just need to add a little console. Check out the rack or the desk console. That's DESQ. You can get to that by going to axiaaudio.com/DESQ. In fact, if you go there now, you'll find a picture of a guy holding one of these things up. These are just so cool consoles. And if you're a small station, there's a good chance this will do everything you need. At my station in Cleveland, Mississippi, we do have an Element console, but we could use a desk console just fine. We use 6 faders, and that's everything we need for the morning show and for production. Check it out on the web, axiaaudio.com/desk. Get your pricing from your favorite Axia dealer. And thank you very much, Axia, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, episode 171. We're talking about topical things. Yes, sir.
I have an idea here. Now yeah. I want you and Chris and Andrew to pay attention, Steve, because I'm just patent, and you heard it here first. Okay, now all of these consoles, they're all computers. So eventually, at some point, you need to reboot it. What we need to do is come up with a way to come up with some parameter and tell when it needs to be rebooted. And we have to write something into the program for the encoder so that when you turn the encoder up, it goes just like a carbon pot. and you know you have to reboot the console. Isn't this a great idea?
Aren't you glad? Yeah. The jock calls the engineer. Hey, the pots are getting. Hey, excuse me. That's not the right accent, is it? Hey, Mr. Engineer, the pots are getting kind of dirty on the console. What should I do? Well, I'll take care of that for you. Push the reset button. Well, the engineer dials in remotely and reboots the console remotely. I got to say, though, I'm not going to say that consoles like this never need to be rebooted. That would be irresponsible to say that. But I got to tell you, these things are running Linux. There aren't memory leaks going on. These things, Linux is such a great operating system for managing stuff. It's embedded, real-time Linux, just incredible stuff. And I have seen these things go 2.5, 3.5 years without a reboot. I mean, usually, even if you've got backup power and UPS, something will die about the power before the console has to get rebooted. In other words, the console will get rebooted because of something else going wrong in the radio station before you ever have to reboot it. And that just amazes me about these consoles. Well, first time, I'm glad you mentioned, I'm sorry to just run off like this. First time I ever installed an Axia console, I mean, this was beta software. This was in Auburn, Alabama, at the college station there, and I put in one of our old. Well, Tom, you had them at WOR. Those what were they called? Smart Service. Lord. Yeah, Smart Service consoles. And I felt I had done something wrong, and maybe it was locked up. I wasn't sure, and it was again beta software. So I call one of our developers. Happened to get the Polish guy, Machi, smartest guy I ever met. But so I said, "Hey, Machi, it's Kirk. Listen, I think I may have locked the console up. Can I just pull the power, or is there a key combination to reboot it?" And Machi, this guy is so confident in his coding. He says, "Reboot? There is no reboot." Like, why would you have to reboot the console? You don't need to. If you think you need to, you're wrong. Reboot? There is no reboot.
Surprise.
Yeah. I think I really didn't need to reboot it. I think I'd just done something wrong that I just didn't know where I was. All right. Hey, let's continue on a couple quick more topical topics. One of them being about regulatory fees. Okay, so years ago, I don't think we had regulatory fees. I think I remember operating radio stations where we didn't have an annual fee to pay to the government for whatever it is they do with our license, even though that year we didn't do anything with our license. Now we have regulatory fees. We have had for, at least a dozen years or so. Mm-hmm. Maybe since 96. Maybe that's when they came in with the Telecom Act of 96. That would be almost 20 years. The Commission has proposed changing how it assesses and collects fees to account for changes in the communications industry as well as its own staff changes over the years. Depending on whether the agency keeps the current process in place for 2013 or changes how it determines the fees, radio stations could see either a modest increase or a large increase over 2012. I don't have all the details on that. Oh, yeah, I guess I could click on that, find out some details. But okay. So give you an example. Fiscal year 2013 radio station regulatory fees. If you are an FM, let's see, we have a Class A in a population served. See, they go by population served, so I guess you got to calculate that, and I'm sure there's a way they want you to calculate it. Anybody know offhand how they want you to calculate that? Maybe somebody watched the chat room. But anyway, let's say we serve a population of between 75,000 and 150,000 people. So, a rural area that's got a couple of towns there. We're looking at an annual regulatory fee for a Class A station of $1,925 under one scenario, and it may go up to $2,100 under another scenario. So, a couple $1,000s. If you've got a Class C0 or C1 or a full C or a B station and you're serving the same number of people, you're paying about $3,000 a year regulatory fees. Now, let's jump from that. That's kind of an average small market, Podunkville out in Mississippi somewhere like my stations. Let's say that you're serving a big metropolitan area and you're serving what's that? New York City. Take a look at those fees and fall off your chair. They make the dividing line 3 million people. If it's 3 million to everybody in the world, you're paying the same fee. For a Class B station like you have in New York City, you're looking at about $12,000 annually as a fee to the FCC. Now, to any of the top stations in New York City, that's not much money. That's 4 laptops. Maybe it's 12 laptops. But if you're a small station in New York City struggling, and there are several, that's a lot of money. That's big bucks. Yeah, and you know what's worse, Kirk? Have you looked at the TV fees? No.
Don't look at the TV fees.
Oh yeah, we'll have to administer smelling salts. I mean, honest to God, the fees are that high.
True.
So. Okay, how do you fund the FCC? I thought they were funded out of the general fund from our tax dollars, but apparently that's not enough. So
I don't know if they did that or if they backed down on that a number of years ago and then decided to start charging regulatory fees.
Now, on the one hand, if we got to have an agency to regulate broadcasters, I'm in favor of the expenses of regulating those broadcasters be borne by the broadcasters. I don't conceptually have a problem with that. How do you make it fair? I don't know. One way to make it fair might be to make it as a percentage of revenue like ASCAP and BMI do. Would that be fair? Would, 0.2% of income be fair? Or, some percentage. Would that be fair?
No matter what method you choose, the question of fair, somebody's going to be yelling it's unfair, no matter what you do. Even with taxes, with property taxes, they assess your property, and you pay a tax on it. Well, some people say, well, that's unfair. I couldn't get that for my house if I sell it. On the other hand, there are some towns where they assess. You laugh at the assessment because you get 10 times what you'd, what they're assessing it for if you sold the house. So, it's kind of a weird topic to.
Well, let's
fair, you know.
Put this another way. If you are the smallest radio station possible, like a class, what is it, Class D AM station. This would be on one of those Class D frequencies, a kilowatt daytime and nighttime. Your fee, well, I guess this isn't the minimum. AM Class C seems to be the least expensive to have. $575 or $600 under a different scheme, about $600 a year. Now, I used to run a radio station, an AM station, a daytime AM station on 1500 on the dial. So it didn't get out very far. The tower, it was only the paint on the tower kept the tower up. And bottom line was $600. That's a lot of money. That would be, you ready for this? Back in that day, that would have been 600 commercials to run to pay that regulatory fee. $1 a holler. And even if we had, during my tenure there, if we had doubled the rates to $2 a commercial, that'd still be 300 commercials to pay the regulatory fee. Isn't that several days worth of commercials? 300? It would have been for us, actually. It would have been a couple days worth of commercials out of the year. I guess the other thing I want to bring up is, what do you get for your money? What if the FCC has absolutely no action on your radio station that year? It costs the FCC basically nothing for you to sit there and operate for that year. Is that just getting averaged with when you do make a change? Now, of course, when you file, when you make a filing to maybe for a license change, a minor change, a major change, you want to change the height of your tower, you want to change your power level, you want to move your transmitter location, you got to file a fee with that too. These are above and beyond filing fees. These are just regulatory fees. These are the fees so we can regulate you. I guess that's where I have a
well, you can also make the argument that if you don't have any, if they came out and didn't find anything this year and you were totally clean, well, hey, maybe you should get a discount next year, but they're going to go out of their way to find something. No matter what you do, it's not going to matter.
Huh. Chris, any thoughts? Or will you just get in trouble?
No. I mean, regulatory fees are useless. I mean, it's just another tax. It's just another burden. Just as you pointed out, $600 for the year. That's a lot of spots for a station whose income is based on what they're doing. I would prefer, rather than sit here and waste time putting proposals together and notice pros rulemaking, how about you put together the budget that the FCC actually works with, and let's look at the numbers and say, hey, where's the money being spent and how? And really, what am I getting for my regulatory fee? Because wait a minute, the FCC doesn't do the regulatory stuff exactly, because all they do is propose. It's Congress who has to make the decision whether or not it's going to happen. So are the regulatory fees actually going to the FCC, or is it just going to the coffers? I mean, there's a lot of ambiguity with this whole thing. And as Tom pointed out, and as we would think, to ourselves, if my station is clean, running, and everything, I spent $12,000 for the year for a regulatory fee. What did I get for it? Why do I have to pay it? What are you regulating? That's not already been done. That was in the Communications Act 1934, Telecommunications Act of 1996. What changes have been made? What's going on? Nothing. The FCC has reduced its staff. The FCC has reduced a lot of the research people, a lot of the testing and stuff. And I think it's less than 1% of their work is done for broadcast. The rest of it's done for life safety and public safety stuff. So I'd rather see a spreadsheet as to what's going on with the money.
I've got a friend.
No one is immune from
go ahead.
From the regulatory fees. I mean, if you take a look, take a look at your ham license. While it's not called a regulatory fee, there's a regulatory fee built into your ham license fee when you renew it. So, and hams pretty much regulate themselves. So, and we're still paying a regulatory fee.
And you have the universal access charges for your phone bills that, for some reason, unnecessary that the government requires.
Hey, I know one guy who would have the following to say about FCC regulatory fees. Okay, FCC, if you're going to make me pay, let's see, I've got 8 radio stations. They're all small market. All of them are barely breaking even or losing money regularly. Let's see. If you're going to make me pay you a grand total of, it's probably going to be close to $25,000 for the year. if I got to pay $25,000 a year as regulatory fees for my 8 tiny little radio stations, let me ask that you do one thing for me in return. Answer the phone when I call.
Oh, you want everything.
You can't get anybody at the FCC. Even if you know who you're calling, it's somebody who has an important job behind a desk. You call, you always get voicemail every time, or you get the announcement saying the voicemail box is full.
Well, on the other hand, Kirk, look at it this way. You paid your regulatory fee. You helped them buy the new voicemail system. It's working.
Yeah. There you go. I remember the day before voicemail that when you called somebody at the FCC, they'd answer the phone.
And not anymore.
And if you sent them a nice letter, they'd send you a nice letter back. Those days are long gone. All right, let's see. I think we got one more quick topic. What to do about the connected vehicle is the buzz in Detroit. And the problem is that I think the biggest problem they have is trying to figure out what kind of design are we going to do where we don't get sued for distracting the driver with the new fantabulous dashboard that has Pandora, Spotify, all my radio stations, the weather, and the latest headlines from NPR, all right there on the dashboard. And we can make it so pretty and flash and spin. How do we do that without distracting the driver?
I don't know. I need to know how fast I'm going. I need to know how much fuel I have left, and I need to know if I'm going to boil over. That's what I need to know.
You need the idiot lights.
And really, think about it.
All you need is Google Glass.
Well, that can be distracting too, can't it?
It keeps your eyes on the road. Granted, you may have one eye looking at something else.
Let me tell you this. Google Glass is very distracting to the other guys in the men's room. Hey, watch where you point that thing. I'm talking about your glasses. I just kind of feel like, here's an example. My wife drives a Jeep Commander, and it's on its navigation system. There's not a lot you can do while the car's moving. It won't let you. Now, yeah, you can get third-party software to override all that, which we haven't done. But I just wonder how much, in the old, I guess for decades, we had radios with buttons. So if you could turn a knob and push a button, that's all you had to do. And that wasn't very distracting. Although, you come to think of it, I had an accident one time because I was looking at my radio. Gee, it's been 20 years ago, but I did.
Didn't anybody tell you there were no pictures to look at?
No, there weren't. I don't know why I was looking at it. Maybe I was trying to set a preset, but I drove right off the road into a ditch. Well, so I just wonder how they're going to solve this. And I trust they're going to do a good job. But, man, I have sat in some cars at these trade shows that the display just looks spectacular. But, man, it can be fun to play with when you're driving down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Tobin, you must have some idea about this.
It's social engineering. Unfortunately, we have become a group of individuals that just our attention span is zero, and we have to play with everything in front of us. As you pointed out 20 years ago, you still had an issue with distraction. The only thing you can do is probably deactivate the ability for you to do certain things while the car is in motion. I don't know if there's an answer, because when I've traveled in the cars with folks, and some of the cars I've been in have all the latest electronics in it, and it's just amazing the amount of activity at the dashboard. Moving, doing this, doing that. It's just like, okay, we're doing 60 miles an hour here. You mind keeping your eyes and hands on the wheel and the road, and just it's a little unnerving. Now, granted, I know F-14 pilots and F-35 pilots do it all the time with their heads-up display, and they flip around and take 4 Gs, 20 Gs at a clip and still manage to keep their things going. But I don't think we can do that on the ground. It's just my thoughts.
Yeah,
no,
I don't know.
There's not that much traffic up top, so.
Now, the people at Ford, they keep touting how fabulous their Ford Sync technology is. And I've only played with it for a few minutes, and I didn't know all the commands to say, but it seemed to be pretty cool. I'm not even putting it down. I just don't know enough about it.
I have Sync in my car. I have a different name for it, but
it's not kitchen sink either.
No, it sounds like Sync.
Well, let me ask you this. Maybe you can say plus or minus. Is it at least going in the right direction with something with voice commands on Ford Sync, or is that just not going to pan out?
It is, but the idea of it is that if you're driving down the road, you say, phone, bing, phone, call Kirk, calling Kirk. You drive faster, you get more road noise. You get more road noise, phone. You end up shouting, phone! Okay, this is phone. Call Kirk. Calling a jerk. No, call Kirk. As the road noise goes up, it can't understand you. And I've owned the car for 3 years. I've yet to figure out where the microphone is.
Yeah. So these are definitely first world problems to have, aren't they? Will we get this figured out? Will we have a lot of accidents in cars and while we're getting this figured out? Yeah. I don't know. I wonder, maybe this is why Google is developing the autonomous car. So you can sit in the car and play with all this stuff.
While they have advertising on the screen.
And have, advertising on the screen. Yeah, while your car just drives itself. I wonder, will that happen before we're gone from this life? Autonomous. Will we be able to get in a car and just tell it where to go and not worry about it for a while till we're there?
The guys
I like to be the optimist and say yes.
The guys on Mythbusters took one of the prototype cars and drove it. It was actually quite cool to see. It was they had somebody sitting behind the wheel, but they actually sat there and they mapped out a route, and the guy just kind of sat there with his hands folded like this, and the car did its thing and pulled up to the curb.
I think that'd just be awesome. Oh man. I wonder, and you always saw the Google autonomous car driving down highways and city streets. I wonder, how does it do? Like today, I was in a parking garage, and it was just so busy, and with people darting out in front of the car, and then 5 cars ahead, somebody can't decide they can't find the accelerator pedal, and you sat there for such a long time, and then finally I found a parking spot that was a little hard to pull into. You had to be creative about where you were pulling forward and backing up into, but I did, and I was so glad I got this spot. It was very convenient, and I wonder if the Google's autonomous car could do that kind of thing. Is it ready for that yet? I have no idea, but I sure would like to find that out.
Well, you don't need to worry about that part. You just have the laser-guided red laser cutting tool. Slice the car in half, it splits apart, you drive through it. That's how it's going to go.
How about this? The Google car is absolutely expert at finding valet parking.
Ooh.
There you go.
There you go. Just pull up to the valet, kid. All right. Guys, it's been fun. I'm giggling and laughing at all the things we've talked about. I appreciate you being here. Our show, this episode 171 of This Week in Radio Tech, has been brought to you by Axia Audio and the little tiny diminutive yet very robust and effective rack and desk consoles. On the web at axiaaudio.com and click on rack, R-A-Q, or desk, D-E-S-Q. You can actually connect 2 of these to the same engine, the Core 32 or the Core 16. That can get pretty darn inviting in terms of how much it costs. Check it out, axiaaudio.com. And I appreciate them very much for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. It's been kind of a relaxing episode where we've touched on a lot of topical topics. We do have some guests coming up in coming weeks, so stick around for that. One of our old friends, I believe Dana Popolo, is going to rejoin us for an upcoming show. And we've got a very technical guy who I'm eager to get on the show, Gary Minker. Gary does fantastic measurements on antenna systems from the ground usually, and can really fine-tune an antenna system and find out where a problem is very accurately. Unbelievable technology that Gary puts to use. Also, we'll have Mark Persons back on the show in a coming episode. Mark is always great at talking about the real nuts and bolts of fixing radio stations and gear on the bench. Thanks for joining us. Be sure you check us out at thisweekinradiotech.com, where you can go and watch the show, download the show, and let me encourage you to just subscribe to an RSS feed or subscribe to our show on iTunes. It'll show up in your computer automatically. You don't have to worry about clicking a button. It'll just be there when you have a few moments to listen or to watch. Thanks again to Andrew Zarian for producing the show up in Queens, New York on the GFQ network. You can always go there at gfqlive.tv. And thanks again to, Tom Ray in the Hudson Valley of New York. Tom, where can people find you?
People can find me at www.tomrayconsulting.com.
All right. And from Manhattan, the best-dressed engineer in radio, Chris Tobin, where can people find you?
The easiest way to do it is just musicanusa.com and go from there.
All right. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.
That's all the bandwidth we can pill for this week. Another tort has propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This Week in Radio Tech. Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you liked today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here. Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penelope Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission. Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango. Signing off. Okay.